Okay. Welcome everybody to the fiscal year 2025 HUD CoC competition info session number 1. My name is Stephanie Bodman. I am the program manager for homeless services with Bucks County Housing Community Development. We are the CoC lead, HMIS lead, and collaborative applicant for PA 511 CoC. So in the info session today, we're going to go over a couple different items. One is just an overview of the new NOFO that HUD released and the general eligibility criteria, new project criteria, the DB bonus opportunity, an overview of the ranking and priority, as well as the timeline and deadlines for the competition. So for those of you that are new to the CoC process, this is an annual NOFO that HUD releases to Continuum of Cares to apply for federal funding for housing programs. They recently changed it to a biannual process, and then they switched back to an annual process for this year. So this NOFO was a little unexpected, as we were anticipating that fiscal year 24 and 25 that was awarded last year would be combined and just have renewals this year. So this is a little bit of a surprise for all CoCs, and the deadline is pretty tight. It's a 60-day turnaround to HUD, which you'll see in our CoC level timeline that we go over a little later. So the CoC is the entity responsible for coordinating funding for local providers for individuals experiencing homelessness, and we are the collaborative applicant that is responsible for providing the information, doing the scoring, ranking, and submitting the consolidated application as well as the project priority listing to HUD by their deadline. So let's go into the changes because they're pretty significant for this year's NOFO. So the first major change is that HUD is limiting permanent housing projects to no more than 30% of our CoC's annual renewal demand. An annual renewal demand is basically the sum of all of our renewal projects, including like the FMR rates and everything like that. So they're only allowing 30% of that for us to submit this year, which is $643,000. To put that in perspective, currently $1.6 million of our annual renewal demand funds is permanent housing. So we're looking at requiring a shift of a little less than $1 million to different project types. And HUD is considering permanent housing as permanent supportive housing projects, rapid rehousing projects, and joint THRH projects. So if you have if you're a renewal applicant and you have any of those project types, just keep that in mind that HUD is limiting that this year, which is very significant, as there has been no limitation in previous years. Another significant change is that HUD is only allowing Tier 1 to be equal to 30% of the CoC's annual renewal demand, which again is that $643,000. In previous years, Tier 1 was typically around 93, 94, 95% of our ARD. So the majority of our projects were able to be in Tier 1, which was more guaranteed funding versus being in Tier 2. The CoC process works in a 2-tier system. So Tier 1 is more guaranteed funding as long as you meet HUD's requirements and HUD's deadlines. And then Tier 2 is where you're more at risk of either getting the project or not, depending on the consolidated application and your specific project application's scoring. Again, in previous years, the majority of our funding was in Tier 1, and this year, about 1.5 million of that funding will have to go in Tier 2, which is very significant. There's a lot more competition and risk at the national level of which projects will be funded. So this year, we're really stressing the importance of a high quality, well-written application, meeting all of HUD's requirements, which we incorporated into our scoring to help projects be successful and get the maximum points available through HUD to further guarantee funding in Bucks County. So some of the policy changes that are in the NOFO for this year, it really focuses on ending the crisis of street homelessness. So the HUD is really looking to direct resources towards outreach, intervention, and helping individuals regain self-sufficiency. They are prioritizing treatment and recovery. So they're looking at projects that can have on-site behavioral health treatment for their clients, wraparound supportive services, as well as requiring participants to basically participate in the programs, which is kind of like moving in the opposite direction of the housing first model that HUD's been encouraging everybody and requiring for the last several years. Again, they're looking to promote self-sufficiency. So, partnering with workforce development, employers, childcare, they're really looking at projects that have plans in place to increase employment income for their clients that can increase employment income. Advancing public safety, so partnerships with law enforcement, co-responders, those types of programs. And then minimizing trauma, so providing trauma-informed care and ensuring participant safety in the programs. So the different project types that are eligible in this year's NOFO is one is CoC planning costs. So this is an application that each CD as the collaborative applicant will apply for. This is only available to collaborative applicants, and it's not part of the annual renewal demand. It is a separate new application. Renewal projects that are eligible for 2025 funds. In order to be a renewal project eligible, you have to have funds expiring in calendar year 2026. And then new projects created through reallocation. So reallocation is taking an existing renewal project and reallocating it to a different project type. A CoC bonus, DB bonus, or a combination of reallocation funds and bonus funds, which we'll get into a little more. So the request for new application. So with all these changes in the NOFO for this year, the CoC Executive Committee has determined that we are only accepting new project applications for transitional housing and supportive service only project types. So we are not accepting new applications for permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing projects. The CoC bonus amount available this year is very significant. It's $695,000 available for new project types, which is much higher than it has been in the past. So this is a good opportunity for, if you have either an existing or planning to create a transitional housing or supportive service only project, this may be an opportunity to, get renewable funding for that and really have a good model and plan for serving individuals experiencing homelessness, those types of programs. A little bit about the transitional housing component. So transitional housing provides temporary housing combined with wraparound supportive services to interimly house somebody with the goal of moving them successfully to their own permanent housing. This can be site-based, scattered site, so you don't necessarily have to have transitional housing all in one building. It can be scattered site based on where the tenant finds housing. Participants in a transitional housing, they must have a signed lease, a sublease, or an occupancy agreement based on how the program's set up. The lease has to be for at least 1 month and up to 24 months of rental assistance. And then it has to be automatically renewable upon expiration. Grant funds for TH projects can be used for acquisition, rehab, new construction, leasing, rent assistance, operating, supportive services, and like that, I think HUD has a 10% admin cap per grant, so it would include that as well. If you go to the HUD Exchange, there is a detailed summary of all the different types of supportive services that are eligible through HUD. I believe there's 13 different types, case management being one of those. But you can get a lot more detail just going to the HUD Exchange and looking at that. For transitional housing, they really are highlighting the need and focus on supportive services combined with the housing. So they are requiring that the project have a supportive service agreement in place with each program participant that requires them to, participate in the services. This can be through a contract, occupancy agreement, lease, or similar. And the project must be able to demonstrate that it will provide up to 40 hours, not up to, but 40 hours or more per week of customized services for each participant. This can be a combination of different types of supportive services based on what the client needs, such as case management, employment training, substance use treatment, etc. And again, this is primarily for participants that are unemployed or underemployed. If they are employed for 40 hours a week, that requirement, will be proportionally adjusted for their number of hours worked. And the requirement does not apply for participants if they are age 62 plus or have a physical or developmental disability, not including substance use disorder. So, HUD is looking at it from the perspective that if an individual is not a senior, 62 plus, or physically disabled, or have a developmental disability, that their goal is to get that individual into some sort of training, treatment, support to get them back to self-sufficiency for long-term permanent housing. And then as far as services, services through TH projects cannot be provided prior to move-in. The TH project really does start at move-in, and then you can provide supportive services, case management for up to 6 months after the rent assistance ends on the transitional housing project. So that's just one of I think the most significant changes from RAPID is that for a traditional RAPID project, once they're enrolled, they don't have to be housed yet. You provide case management and work with them until they locate housing, then continue that case management, and then can do that for up to 6 months after exit. For TH, you can't do the prior case management before the housing placement. So that is just something to keep in mind. Whether if you're intending to apply for a TH project, you might want to think about also applying for a supportive service only project that can provide that case management for individuals up until they move into your TH project, or looking at other funding sources or other existing programs that you have that could provide that support prior to the move-in to make that project work. Supportive service only projects. These are projects that can basically provide supportive services either to sheltered or unsheltered individuals, such as conducting outreach, providing referrals, etc. You cannot have an SSO project that is assisting an individual enrolled in a permanent housing project, with the exception of emergency shelters. So, an eligible SSO project would be case management for a participant that is in an emergency shelter. An SSO project would not be eligible for a participant that is enrolled in a transitional housing project in housing, is the main difference there. So they really are looking for unsheltered and sheltered, but the shelter can only be an emergency shelter. And again, there's a detailed summary of all the different supportive service components that are eligible through HUD on the HUD Exchange. And then for new projects, again, the CoC bonus is that $695,000. The DV bonus this year is $347,000, which is a little bit of a decrease from previous years, but that is pretty significant still. And then transition projects. So a transition project is basically when you take a renewal project and you transition it to a different component. So for this competition, the big one will be taking a renewable rapid project and transitioning it to a transitional housing project. The main requirement is that it has to be the same organization in both scenarios. And based on previous guidance, the new guidance has not come out yet from HUD, but in previous years when this has occurred, the provider that is doing the transition grant would submit a new transition project in eSnaps, and then there would be a part in the application where it asks you what project basically you're linking this to, because it's from the renewals. So you don't have to do your renewal as well as the new application. It'd be one new application for the new component, basically stating in that application it's a transition grant and what grant it's transitioning from. And then we kind of link it on the back end when we submit it to HUD. According to the NOFO, transition grants will have up to 1 year to transition to that new component type. So if your project does transition, for example, from rapid to transitional, once you are notified of the award amount, once that grant term starts, you do have some time to transition your clients out of the rapid project and enroll new clients into the TH. So it's not like you have to exit everybody day one. You would have some time to, kind of move existing clients out and enroll new clients. And by the end of that 1 year period, you do have to fully transition to the new project type. According to the NOFO, grants with DV renewal funding are not eligible to use the transition grant process. For DV bonus, the CoC is eligible to apply for up to $347 for new projects. I think the big thing to note here is that you can only apply for transitional housing for DV bonus, and the project cannot exclusively serve victims fleeing or attempting to flee human trafficking. They have to serve the full Category 4 definition in order to be an eligible DV bonus project. So that's just something to keep in mind. And again, as I mentioned on the previous slide, DV renewals are not eligible to transition. So we have one DV rapid rehousing renewal project that you would not be able to do that transition process to a TH project, according to the NOFO. So some next steps. We did post all of the scoring criteria, the new project application, the timeline on the Housing Link website on Friday, the 21st. Please email your intent to apply by December 3rd so we have an understanding of what projects are going to be coming in, so that when the deadline comes, we can kind of keep an eye on things and make sure everything that we thought was being submitted is submitted, and keep in contact with providers. In the intent to apply, please let us know what specific project components you intend to apply for as well, which would be helpful. And then by December 10th, as long as eSnaps opens by then, is when the project applications for both new and renewal will be due in eSnaps. HUD has not yet released eSnaps to accept new project applications, and the detailed instructions have not been released as of today. So we are still kind of waiting to see when that happens. But according to HUD's requirements in the NOFO, project applications do have to be submitted 30 days prior to the deadline. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room. So they should be opening it pretty soon. If you have not yet and you do intend to apply for a project, please go into eSnaps and create your account and get that all set up so you're ready to go when eSnaps does open, there is a lot of guidance available on the HUD Exchange of how to navigate eSnaps. There's a lot of step-by-step technical assistance there because it is pretty complicated if you haven't used it before. But as long as you follow those instructions on the website, you can navigate it through it fairly well. And here's the link for the registration for new users for eSnaps. And then we're going to get into the ranking and priority overview and get into the scoring a little bit. Again, this information is all available on the CoC website, and we'll post the recording as well if you have any colleagues that were not able to be on the call today. So as far as the ranking and priority listing, as I stated earlier, part of our role as collaborative applicant is we have to create a project priority listing in eSnaps that lists all the projects in order based on ranking and score. HUD has two tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. So again, tier 1 is equal to 30% of the ARD. So those are the projects that are more on the safe side as far as funding goes, and tier 2 is more of the risk side depending on rank in tier 2 and then quality of the application as well as overall quality of our consolidated application. Prior to getting to the scoring part, when a new application or renewal is submitted, we do two levels of review. One is an eligibility threshold review, and then 2 is a quality review. If your project does not meet either of these, then it will be rejected, and you will receive a notification about that. We do have a new project review committee that we will review and score all new project applications. And then the CoC Executive Committee, as the governing board, will review and approve all of the scoring of all the projects. And then 15 days prior to the due date, we will send out notification emails to everybody of your project being accepted, rejected, reallocated, or reduced. So Brittany, did you want to go into the scoring detail?
Sure. Do you want to pull up the document stuff?
Sure.
Or do you want me to take over screen share?
What would you prefer?
Give me
I can
one
do
second.
it. I can do it. Let me just zoom in a little bit here.
Okay, so this link is available on the CoC website. I will put that into the chat now for anybody that would like to access it. Steph, can you scroll down? Steph already went over the application reviews and the eligibility thresholds. So just a reminder that any rapid rehousing renewal projects that are ineligible to transition to the transitional housing component will be eligible for renewal. Otherwise, new projects will have to be SSO transitional or CoC planning.
So this is like a major change as far as the eligibility review goes. So if you have a renewal that's a rapid and it's eligible to transition, which is basically any rapid besides the DV renewal, you do have to transition to transitional housing to continue CoC funding. The rest of the eligibility threshold review is straight from the NOFO. It's looking at applicants' experience, meeting program eligibility requirements in the Act, basic stuff like that, nonprofit documentation. This is also new as well, certifying the following. These, I believe, are also in the grant agreement. So if you are awarded funds, this certification is also in your grant agreement that you would have to sign off on to receive the funding. But basically, it's no illegal discrimination and not operating safe consumption sites at your projects. And then at the quality review level, this is for all new projects. So we'll, based on project type, we'll be looking at if your project meets the following, and for transitional, it has to meet 7 out of 10 points. I will also note that the NOFO it's not 100% clear, but the NOFO does state that if your project is selected for funding by HUD, that your project must meet all of the criteria that is listed in the quality review. So for transitional housing, the big one is this 40-hour per week requirement. So they will be basically looking for this and requiring it in order to receive funding for transitional housing, as well as the program participant supportive service agreement. Those I think are the two big ones to keep an eye on when applying for TH. That these are things that HUD is not only expecting but also requiring for this project type. Supportive service standalone projects. So those are basically projects that are not tied to I'm sorry, yeah. So they're not like a street outreach project. So standalone could be the like the case management inside a shelter, or the SSO project serving clients prior to getting into a transitional housing unit. But they have to get 4 to 5 points. And it focuses a lot on like connections to other resources from other sources, and a strategy for providing supportive services for those who traditionally do not engage with the system. And then for street outreach, it's pretty similar, partnering with first responders and law enforcement, which is what one of their policy goals. Has experience providing outreach services, and has successfully been able to exit clients to housing, to shelter, to other types of housing programs based on their needs. And, again, has those connections to other supportive services and resources within the community. And then CoC planning is just for the collaborative applicant, but these are our responsibilities as far as the collaborative applicant and our expectations throughout the year. And then Brittany, I'll let you go over the scoring part here.
All right. So as Steph mentioned, they have not released the detailed instructions, and we have not yet been able to access the applications and eSnaps to review what those look like yet. So for this year, the application scoring has been based on the threshold criteria that Steph just went over briefly, so we can go over that in a little bit more detail here. If you could scroll down. For renewal projects, this year HUD is very focused on improving outcomes, particularly reducing recidivism or returns to homelessness, increasing employment and exits to permanent housing, particularly unsubsidized housing. So that is where you will see the majority of the points here. There are also some special populations that HUD was interested in seeing us serve. So these are directly from, as I said, the threshold criteria. These are the rapid rehousing ones. And you can see that there is the, in order to receive the maximum amount of points, those are the data in parentheses there. And then in addition to that, we're also looking for some narrative as well as some document submissions to make sure that the narrative supports that. So for example, you'll have to provide a supportive services participation agreement plan. So we'll need to see the narrative on that as well as the document. They're also looking for projects to be supported by mainstream health, particularly in areas around physical health and substance use disorder treatment. And also looking for projects that are supported by Medicare, Medicaid, SSI, SNAP, childcare, and especially workforce development. So again, we'll be looking at narrative and documents around match and what those partnerships look like. Permanent supportive housing has very similar criteria. One of the big differences here between this versus rapid rehousing is that they are looking for, in addition to the special populations of youth, DV, seniors, and disability other than SEDS, you could scroll a little bit more, Steph. They are specifically looking for PSH to prioritize those that are elderly, have physical or developmental disabilities, through prioritizing those folks and prioritizing those with disabilities other than SEDS. So while PSH requires that all households have a disabling condition, HUD is specifically looking to serve some subpopulations within that this year. So that is a pretty big change from last year and the differentiating factor between the PSH and the rapid rehousing scoring. For coordinated entry, there are several projects that have coordinated entry through CoC funding. For this, we're going to be looking at data quality for missing data at 0% or less for the full points. Project is dedicated to serving those that are DV survivors, and if the project has fully expended their APR. Other than that, we are looking at narrative for these pieces to do the ranking for those projects. Just primarily around accessibility and making sure the entire CoC's geographic area is covered. For HMIS, this one we're looking for a fully expended APR and that basically the HMIS meets HUD's requirements to be considered an HMIS. And then we get into the new projects. So for this year, projects of a project type of transitional housing will receive 15 points, and projects that are a transition project that are applying to be a transitional housing project. So if you are a rapid rehousing project and you are applying to transition to a transitional housing project, you will receive 15 points in both of those categories for a total of 30. And then from there, a good portion of this is going to be around the narrative pieces that HUD is looking for. They're looking to make sure that households are exiting and that they have a plan to exit within 24 months, that they're exiting specifically to permanent housing, and that they're increasing employment, and that they meet the supportive services requirements, and that is documented. The other thing that we will be looking at is HUD once again is focusing on outcomes. So for the transition projects, or projects that have other housing projects within the CoC, we'll be pulling those APRs to see what those outcomes were. And so we'll be using those APRs for the quantitative portion of the scoring. Where a CoC funded project is available, we will use that, and we will be using data for the most recent contract year. Street outreach, they're not going to be eligible for the transitional housing or the transition project points. They have the narrative components here, and again, they're specifically looking for consultation with law enforcement, and a history of consultation with law enforcement are the new things this year. And if you could scroll down a little bit, Steph, these are very similar outcome thresholds that are slightly adjusted to address the type of population. We'll be looking at ones that previously operated street outreach outcomes, and we'll be looking at calendar year 2024. Just as a point of clarification, if you do not currently operate a street outreach program in the CoC, you will receive 0 points in all of these categories. And then this is the standalone, which is not street outreach and not coordinated entry. So if you're doing any other type of SSO project other than coordinated entry and other than street outreach, this is the project type for this scoring. So again, this project type won't be eligible for the transitional housing or the transition project points. It has narrative. This one is around ensuring that the services provided will lead to outcomes of exit to permanent housing. Otherwise, it's very similar to the street outreach narrative that's required. And if you could scroll down a little more, right? So the outcomes here, we will be looking at a previously operated project that the standalone project will support. So for example, if you are an emergency shelter and you are applying for emergency shelter case management, we will take a look at the outcomes of your emergency shelter project to compile the scoring here. And that will also be for calendar year 2024. And then the dedicated sheltered, the difference between this one and the one above is that this would be those that are in emergency shelter specifically, versus the previous project would be a mix of those that may be sheltered or unsheltered. So all of these narrative pieces are the same. We'll also be looking at the project that will be supported by this standalone. And calendar year 2024, some of the thresholds are different to take into account the type of population that is being served here. And I believe that's all the project types.
Yeah, I think the big difference, just to think about it, is for the standalone, this would be the scoring criteria used. For example, if you're applying for an SSO that was, providing probably case management to street homeless as well as sheltered homeless with the goal of moving them into a TH unit. So it's that pre-case management is what we're looking at here. And then the sheltered is if you're only serving clients in a emergency shelter situation. So like that shelter case management eligible project type here. And yeah, I think that is it. The rest of this is just kind of going over that once the applications are received, we do those threshold reviews, do the scoring, and then we put things in order based on the scoring and the ranking, and then CoC exec will vote on that for our submission to HUD. Let me go back to the PowerPoint here. So timeline and deadlines. So applications are to be submitted in eSnaps no later than December 10th. Of course, if eSnaps is not open by that date, we will have to adjust this. But according to HUD's NOFO requirements, the furthest out we could potentially adjust it to is like the 13th or 14th. So we're hoping to stick with this December 10th date unless something happens at the federal level. Executive committee will be meeting and then applicants will be notified afterwards about their inclusion. And then this is the full timeline here. So again, if you can submit your intents by the 3rd, applications due the 10th, the new project committee will review, and then we will be submitting by January 12th in eSnaps for both the consolidated application and the priority listing with all the different projects. All right, so there was one question in the chat about application template available. Unfortunately not, so we do not know what will be in the consolidated application or in the specific new project applications until eSnaps opens up. They do not provide any templates online. But you can expect that what we went over in the presentation today will be generally what they ask in the project application. So they are going to be looking for those connections to resources, supportive service agreements, partnerships with law enforcement, treatment on site, those types of things. So just be prepared to have partnerships and narrative ready to go for those types of questions. If we received a bonus last year for a project that will likely not fit the new criteria or just not be reapplied for, but we have another completely different bonus project in mind, would be able to apply for TH. So Brian, I think you're referring to the PSH bonus you received last year through FSA. PSH is eligible for renewal. But yes, in theory, you could reallocate a PSH to a TH if that was your organization's decision.
That makes sense. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is more challenging to do that, especially if your PSH project has program participants already, because they would not be eligible under the TH component once you transitioned. But in your situation, you don't have program participants yet, so it's not as much of a challenge for a new project that hasn't launched yet. But yes, in theory, you could do that.
Gotcha. My other question, I guess, kind of a follow up to that. So could we do another bonus if we wanted to, in addition? So for this year, could we do another bonus? We really have technically 3 projects altogether.
Yes,
Okay.
There's no limit on how many projects, like new projects, you can submit, technically, as long as they meet those eligible component types and are quality applications.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Yep. Any sense of what type of customized services that would count towards the 40-hour requirement? Yeah, so this is the 13 types. I can click on the link if we want to go over those really quick. Let me go back to that slide. This should open up okay. We'll see. I have 3 screens growing, so I don't know which one is going to pop up on here. Okay, so I think everybody should be able to see this. So these are the different supportive services that are eligible. So annual assessment of needs. So this is staff time, determining the client's needs every year, assistance one time with moving. So if you had to move somebody into the project, etc., one-time cost with that. Case management, of course, that's going to be the big one. Child care, establishing or operating a child care, providing child care vouchers, education services, employment assistance and job training, food, housing search and counseling, legal services, life skills training, mental health, outpatient outreach services, substance use treatment services, transportation, utility deposits, and staff overhead costs related to services. So those are the different components that are eligible under CoC. This is just like a summary page. I think if you actually go into 24 CFR 578, it does go into a little more detail about each one specifically.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to some of these are costs, not hours. Like, how do you, like it says, food is an eligible cost, but food is not a time. I guess that's what I'm trying to understand or differentiate between.
Yeah, so the NOFO does say hours for supportive service, so it is different. Like food is an eligible supportive service. So if you have supportive service line item in your contract, you could technically use some of that funding for food for the participant, but it's not necessarily contributing to those hours that you need for that 40-hour requirement. I think you would want to focus more on like connections to these other things. And again, they don't have to be things that your organization is providing, as long as you can document that they're getting that credit counseling or employment training, and you can document that in your file if you're ever monitored. Okay, so let me close that. Any other questions? Let's see what else is here. Is the application submitted only through eSnaps? No, so this year it's just through eSnaps. We don't have a supplemental questionnaire or anything like that. So just the application eSnaps. We did put in the project scoring document. Let me go to the top here.
I do just want to point out again that we have not yet received the detailed instructions. So right now the plan is that everything will be available to us through eSnaps, but if the detailed instructions come out, there may be a supplemental document that's required to meet the needs. So just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, we may have to require additional things depending on the detailed instructions.
Yeah.
We kind of just had to base everything off of the NOFO, which we don't typically do. So this is a little new this year. Just wanted to note that in the beginning, as far as the eligibility threshold goes, if you do submit your application in eSnaps and we see an issue with one of these requirements, we will reach out to you and kind of have a conversation with you about whether that was an error, like a technical error that can be corrected. And we will give you a short time to redo, make that edit in your application for us to re-review for that quality threshold or eligibility threshold. So that gives us, by having it due the 10th, we have like a couple days to send applications back, to make edits, to resubmit. So there is some opportunity to make edits after it's submitted in eSnaps. If there is any like errors or anything that need to be corrected, we can send those back to get those corrected. If it was intentional, then it would just be rejected at that point, if that's confirmed. Were there any other questions? Okay, so just a couple highlights to go over again. I'm going to pull up one more document here. This is the request for new applications that is available on the Housing Link website and was sent out via email. The eligible project components are transitional housing and supportive service only. So those are the ones that we will be accepting. So do not submit a rapid rehousing, that will be rejected. Do not submit a new PSH, that will be rejected. Unfortunately, that 30% cap really prohibits what we can accept and what we can work with in this year's competition. Transitional housing, please make sure that your project is meeting that HUD eligibility and quality threshold that they're looking for as far as those supportive services go. Street outreach or sheltered SSO projects, please make sure you provide really good narrative about your existing project that you're doing this in, how this you do like your linkages to services, connections to resources, your partnerships with other organizations, your partnerships with law enforcement, co-responders, all of that, moving people to permanent housing, connecting them to treatment. That's everything that HUD is really looking for this year for a high scoring application. Can transitional housing be shared housing? Yes. Actually, I'm not. That's a good question. I know for Rapid, we could do that. For TH, they would still have to have their own lease. And the NOFO does not specifically talk about shared housing for TH, so I do not know for sure.
And for TH, it's typically 12 to 24 months or 24 months, 18 to 24 months for transitional housing.
Yeah, you can pay rent up to 24 months, which is the same as Rapid currently. So you can do the rent assistance up to 24 months and then case management for additional 6 months after the rent ends. And our understanding is that HUD does not really care whether it's site-based or scattered site housing. So in theory, you could like put somebody into a unit, pay their rent, and then they could in theory stay in that unit after your rent ends, and they would just have a separate lease, and you can continue the case management for like 6 months to make sure they're stable before exiting them, which works pretty similar to what rapid rehousing does now.
Okay.
Any other questions? Again, this is the timeline we're working off of. HCD is available to assist if you have any technical questions, especially once eSnaps opens. We do encourage you, because of the number of applications, to please review the HUD provided guidance prior to reaching out to us, just because we will be assisting a lot of providers with different technical assistance questions. So please try to review first and see if you can figure it out on your own prior to contacting us around that. But we are happy to help if you do get stuck somewhere when you're trying to submit your application. We just can't assist you with writing narrative or providing suggestions to at an individual level to enhance your project. We're happy to do that in these info sessions. We will be having another one on December 1st. We'll send out the information for that. We will probably not do this level of detail as far as the NOFO goes, but hopefully if the detailed instructions and eSnaps is open by then, we can focus it more on that information, which will be fairly new at that point. So we can provide more information and have some technical assistance Q&A at the end. If you are having any issues in eSnaps, we can talk through some of that. So I'm going to stop the recording now, if I can figure that out.